Hi everybody, this is Mr. Farmer, and we're talking about AP Microeconomics, continue with imperfect competitions, specifically monopolistic competition. Alright, here we go. So first thing, before we get to this, think back to the monopoly graphs. You'll see why as we talk about this. So do you understand them? Do you have any questions about them? Can you picture them in your brain? Hopefully the answer is yes, and that looks about like this. They usually do make a profit, so I had it as a profit. So you have a downsloping demand curve, margin revenue curve, and all those things. Okay, so if that does not make sense, go back to the Monopoly videos. Otherwise, here we go. So Monopoly competition. A couple characteristics we want to get into. Number of firms are that are in the industry. Are products differentiated or standardized? Are they price makers, takers? And can they enter or exit the industry in the long run? That's the long run for that last bullet point. So really quickly, because this has definitely been talked about before, one, number of firms. There's a large number of firms. No one firm has a domination on there. It's kind of the difference between oligopoly and that. So there's a large number of firms. Specifically, they're going to have what's called a concentration ratio that's less than 40%. So concentration ratio is the sum of the market shares of the top 4 or sometimes 5 businesses. Usually for AP material, we use the 4-firm concentration ratio. And so usually it's 40%. There's some flexibility in there. So oligopolies start around 40%. That's what we call a loose oligopoly, and then 60% is closer to a tight oligopoly. So you can see this graph says 50%. So pretty much the top 4 firms, they each, or top 5 firms, they don't have a large portion, definitely less than 10%, which means that there's a lot of competitors in there and no one firm has the majority, so they can't influence the price is kind of what we're getting at. As far as differentiation, the products are differentiated. I think the shoe industry is a good example of this. There are differences as far as coloring, sizes, fit, all those different things. So they do compete with each other. That physically might be a little different degrees of customer service. You can differentiate yourself in that way. Locations, I think, like coverage, AT&T, Verizon, those kinds of topics. They could also be what's called imagined differences, and this is where marketing plays a huge role. Does that kind of shoe actually make you jump higher? Now, sometimes the answer actually is yes. But how about this? Is the gas station on the left side of the road, is it any better than the right side? No. It's just the right side in not England is easier to get into. It's safer than making a left-hand turn. And so the idea is that they are substitutable. All these shoes can be worn as shoes, but they have some slight niche market that does separate them. So they have some control over their demand curve, unlike perfect competition where they're all identical goods. Therefore, nobody can differentiate themselves. So are they a price maker or a price taker? Honestly, a little bit of both. I'm getting to that in just 1 second, but we will declare them as a price taker, meaning the industry is going to dictate what the price is, or actually more appropriately, what the range of the prices the seller has to be in. Because the products are differentiated, they get to choose their price. They may be priced a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but they need to be within the competitive range, and that's a bigger portion. So we do say that they're a price taker. As far as entrance and exit, just like perfect competition, essentially anytime the market structure has competition in the phrase, firms can enter and leave the market in the long run. Okay, especially compared to like oligopolies or monopolies, which typically have fewer firms, economies of scale, and all those kinds of things, barriers to entry. So it is slightly more difficult than a pure competition because you do need to have a unique product, but you can have a pretty similar product though. So you may need to advertise to other companies, highlighting how yours is different or what sets it apart. So there are some barriers to entry because of that aspect, but you can still enter into it. And in the long run, firms can leave, assuming you're not some kind of utility. And so what this means is that they really start doing what's called non-price competition, which is a fancy way of saying advertising. Because they can't take a price into as much consideration, they can charge higher or lower based off their good or their service. They're going to get into, hey, let's advertise. Coffee is coffee, unless you're, a hoity-toity coffee person. Coffee's coffee. So how do you highlight this? Well, here's a McDonald's. $4 is dumb. Now serving espresso. All right. Kind of an anti-Starbucks in that you got the brown and everything else. So they're saying, hey, don't spend the money on that. It's coffee. We're still good over here, and we do this. So they're trying to highlight something about themselves, and they're trying to get away from. They don't even say what price they say. Okay, what they're selling the good for. They're just saying, hey, $4 is dumb. They could have said $20 is dumb. They're not actually making any positive statements. They're just saying, yeah, it's dumb. Okay, so non-price competition plays a much bigger role in monopolistic competition, even probably more so in oligopolies, actually. So, a couple of assumptions out of all of that. One, each firm in the industry is producing a specific differentiated product. Two, we assume each firm is participating in advertising, so they'll all have similar cost for that. So, what's the demand curve for monopolistic competition look like? One thing you'll notice is that, like monopolies, we're not going to have a side-by-side graph. We don't have the industry graph. We're just going to have the firms graph, and they're going to be representative of the other firms in the industry. So the demand curve is one, elastic. Let's go back to talk about this. So we got our downward-sloping demand curve, just like monopolies. It does mean our margin revenue curve is also downward sloping. Definitely go back and look at that if you need to as far as why that occurs. How can I say it's elastic? Well, elasticity depends on number of sellers, how substitutable the products are kind of the main two things. And for a monopolist competition, there's a large number of sellers, and the products are differentiated, hence downward sloping, not perfectly elastic, but they are still substitutable. So they get some control over it. It's not perfectly elastic, it's just pretty darn elastic, which means downward sloping. Now we are talking about elasticity of demand, not price elasticity of demand. Again, there's a difference there, and go back to the monopoly graph video if you need that. Okay, so in the short run, firms can face a profit, they can be breaking even, they can be minimizing loss, they can shut down. So what do all these look like? So we start with our demand or margin revenue curve. And first thing I like to do is identify my profit maximizing output, which is, with our best friends, marginal cost. Okay, so we get our marginal cost curve where MR equals MC, that's our output, our quantity. And then just like the demand curve, we're going to charge customers what they're willing to pay. That's going to be at our demand curve. Now, because we're producing at a profit, that means at my profit maximizing output, my price is greater than my average total cost. And so there I see my profit. Again, this is in a this is in short run. Okay, in short run, they'll be producing at this. All right, so breaking even, profit maximizing, we have our marginal cost curve, MR equal to MC. Profit maximizing, there is our price, just like before. And so for break even, you want to have your price equal to your average total cost curve, as we can see here. And so we're breaking even. Now, it should be noted, when you're asked to draw this, you need to make sure there's no quantity where the price is greater than the ATC. And I did the best I could with the formatting on here, but you really do need to make sure that is the case. Otherwise, you are indicating that there is an output at which they could be producing at a profit. So usually I'll kind of identify my output right here, and when I draw it, I'll just draw from there down to my marginal cost curve, and I'll just kind of draw up. And it looks ugly. But that way you know that that is a breaking even point, and there's no point where there is profit. This is a little iffy right there. Okay. As far as loss, there are two kinds, of course. Minimizing loss, which is at my profit maximizing output. My price is less than my ATC, but greater than my AVC. And shut down, which is where I am below my AVC. And so the area of loss is my total fixed cost. A very common issue I see is that they want students want to draw the losses all the way down. No, that's only if I operate. I'm not operating my business. So make sure you definitely look at these to identify minimizing losses. Now again, these are all short-run costs. In the long run, firms can enter and leave the market based off of profits. So just like perfect competition, businesses in monopoly competition will only achieve normal profits, aka they break even, in the long run. So in the long run, they always break even, as you can see here. Why does this occur? Well, here we have a graph where they are producing at a profit. So in pure competition, we saw that there's profit. So firms entered into this market. As firms enter into this market, that increased the supply for the market industry. That then decreased the demand for the individual firms because there's more competitors. So even though we don't have the industry graph, the same thing happens. More firms are going to enter this market. That's going to decrease the demand for this one firm. It's going to keep decreasing until they end up breaking even. So the demand decreases, so you show a shift of the demand curve. You're not shifting supply. I know that's a little counterintuitive because we're talking long run, and in the long run supply curve shifts, but that's only because the industry curve shifts. This is the firm side. So there's a decrease in demand as more firms enter into this market because this one firm has more competitors. So once again, they break even in the long run. In reality, businesses might be able to actually produce at a profit in monopolist competition. This is because they might have monopoly tendencies. A hotel that has the best view of something, yeah, there might be a lot of other hotels there, so there's other monopolist competition. But if they got kind of the niche market, they can do that. Or there's lots of companies, but this one has a brand loyalty. So it might have kind of monopoly tendencies because of this niche market. So reality, yes, a firm could be producing a profit. We'll assume they break even though. So as far as efficiencies, it kind of goes the same way with monopolies, so definitely look more about that. Are they allocatively efficient? No, because my demand's not equal to my marginal revenue, and they don't produce that demand equal to marginal cost. Are they productively efficient? Still no. They produce where they are breaking even, which is where the demand equals the ATC, which is not going to be where the marginal cost equals ATC. So again, if you need more with that, go back to the monopolies where I go more in depth on that. One thing we haven't talked about is a thing called excess capacity. That's when the plants and equipment are underused because a firm is not producing at the minimum ATC. So what's that mean? It's the quantity gap between the current production level and the productive efficient outputs. Productive efficiency is the minimum ATC. So this is the excess capacity. It's mostly talking about monopolistic competition. Well, because of the differentiation, there are inefficiencies. So differentiation expands choices, further promotes competition, you get better products, maybe better customer service. You keep needing to improve your products because you can't just say we produce the same thing. You can't just imitate, so you get better and better hopeful improvements. But the greater the differentiation, the more monopolistic a good is, and very likely the more excess capacity, so underused capital, is going to be. So it's a trade-off. Do you want more customer choice or do you want productive efficiency? You can't really have both according to our models. So we went over and trying to be able to identify the characteristics of monopolist competition, went over the price and the outputs, the different levels of that, and allocated productive efficiencies. So here are all the graphs in one spot, so you can definitely take a look at that. And until next time.